Let's go ahead and get going here, and then we can.
But before we do, Mike, I want to give him just a brief. I'm not going to go through a whole bio. Let me give you Kevin's version of an introduction to Mr. Mike Sankey of BRB Publications, and he's not only involved in that, he's involved in a whole host of other things. He's been in the background screening industry longer than I, which says something about the experience that he brings. Mike, I know you at one point worked for a background screening company. Correct if I'm off on any of these points. He's got an extreme knowledge and an extreme experience with public records, criminal record checks, what's gone on over the years. I mean, when you go back to like when we started in '94, you didn't have Google back then. The big search engine wasn't even Yahoo at that point. It was Netscape. It just kind of came onto the horizon, and you had all these AOL just flying around. But I'm not going to digress on that. I'm just saying that a lot has happened. A lot has changed over the years. I did have the pleasure of serving on the board of directors, the founding board with the National Association of Professional Background Screeners. Mike's a good guy. He's somebody that I turn to you could call it as a mentor. He's somebody that has been around. I know I can get his honest take on things, and if I don't know somebody, he's somebody in my short Rolodex as somebody to call and to seek out. So it is with great pleasure that I have Mike Sankey of BRB Publications on the webinar with me. So with that said, I'm going to turn things over to Mike. I will be helping out so Michael can concentrate on giving you good content. I will be interjecting from time to time, but mostly giving this time to Mike and turning the slides for him. So, Mike, here you go.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. And let's just go right into it here. Can you go to the next slide? Kevin?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, there we go. Since folks, first off, I'm glad you're joining us today. I'm glad I'm joining you today. It took a little effort to get here, but I do hope we can provide some valuable information and some ideas that you can put to use. And so as we move forward here, most background checks include, as you well know, multiple parts or components. And a typical check will include, identity validations, prior employment, education verifications, criminal record searches, motor vehicle searches, etc. But the purpose of this presentation is to examine the criminal record search as part of the pre-employment background check. And I think some of the ideas and facts presented today may help you evaluate your practices regarding access to criminal records and also to other public records. So the reality is criminal records are not all created equal. And why is this important? It's because if employers are not knowledgeable, they could jeopardize their hiring practices. Also, they can be misled by deceiving marketing practices and actually have a false sense of protection. So employers should know and understand the options available to them. And this slide's not moving too quick here, is it, Kevin?
We're on criminal records are not all created equal.
Number 3. It just showed up on me there. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Ready for that?
You want to be at the safe hiring checklist?
Sure.
Okay.
Now, I realize this slide does not describe the maze in the world of criminal records, but these points are extremely important to an employer. You'll have a hard time defending yourself if your criminal record policy is not consistent. And that is why it's doubly important to be in the consistent in the level of accuracy that you depend upon when accessing criminal records. For example, if negative or undisclosed criminal record information is discovered on an applicant, is there a company policy in place or procedure to follow? What are the important considerations? By looking at each of the items on this checklist, if you audited your own company's procedures, where would you pass? And I want to say thank you to Les Rosen. He's an author who came from this list. This list came from Les, and appreciate him letting us use this. But this could be a whole separate webinar in itself. The next slide, these are the 3 critical factors we'll explore today. And hopefully, as I said before, you'll take away some ideas that may change or upgrade your policies and procedures.
And Mike, if I can interject a moment, some people may have been slightly confused. They see we advertised Google employment background checks. I promise you we are going to be talking about Google, so in case you were wondering, am I at the right webinar? Yes, we are going to be touching on Google and telling you what you can and can't do about Google. But when you have a veteran person that is extremely knowledgeable of public records, I wanted Mike to delve down deep. So what you're getting is, in my eyes, you're getting a doctorate degree of sorts on public record, criminal record, pre-employment screening. Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. These 3 critical factors to explore, I mean, Google does have a point. When you do a Google search on criminal records or background screening, you're not going to find these answers. And this is the information you need to know about. You depend on having accurate information. You need to stay out of the courthouse in terms of being involved in a lawsuit. So we are going to look at why criminal records are so different, varied, why there is a maze, and look at Google as, the pluses and minuses of doing searching through the Google system. So let's go to the next screen. So there's 6 reasons why criminal records are not created equal. And you can see them on the screen there. There are multiple creation points that can create multiple types of records. Where you access records can make an extreme difference to what you see in the record. Identifiers used to access the records and identifiers shown on the records can be very different. There can be access restrictions imposed by government agencies, and use restrictions can be imposed on both the record requester and the record user. Technology plays an important role, and false advertising can be misleading, deceiving, and cause legal issues. You will not see restrictions imposed very often when you do a Google search on finding a background screening company and look at what they have to say. Let's go on to the next one.
Mike, could you repeat that last thing you were talking about with Google? And
Google, an important factor in doing a background search is to be aware of the restrictions. We're going to cover this later, but you have the Fair Credit Reporting Act. You also have 35 states who have a state version of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. All of these items place restrictions on usage and restrictions on reporting. And when you do a Google search and say, I'm looking for a background company, or I want to find an instant background check or whatever, these companies who offer these services are not interested in the legalities involved. They're just trying to make a quick buck, trying to sell you something for $5 or $15. And that may be fine if you maybe you're looking to find your Aunt Edith or looking to check on a neighbor, but if you're hiring somebody and this person's representing you to the public, I think you want to make sure that you're hiring this person legally and you're not going to get sued for not following state laws. How'd we get to number 8 here? Okay, let's talk about the creation point.
I'm sorry, Mike, that was my bad.
Okay, right. The creation and the inequities of criminal records starts at the courthouse. Quickly, a docket is an index or a running summary of what a case is about. The disposition is the final outcome. This is not an entry-level class in criminal records. I'm going to assume everybody here knows the differences between felonies and misdemeanors and the differences between upper courts and lower courts. But the use of the word docket and disposition are important. And one thing important, this is fine, but one thing when you hear about criminal records being online, it's not the record, it's the docket or the docket summary page that's found online. You're not finding case files online. Somebody says, oh, I get all my criminal records online. You're not going to get the record, you're just getting the index or the running summary of the case. The next 2 slides are interesting slides, and it presents a different look of when criminal records are actually created. Quite simply, criminal proceedings create criminal records, and they also lead to what we call criminal-related records. If you look at the heavy black dot with the number 1 and then the number 2, those are areas or the time when a record's created. The record's created at the booking when there's a arrest record. I want you to notice that the record is reported to the state central repository and then turned to the FBI. And notice also that because the defendant is not booked, misdemeanor citations often are not reported to the state repository at this point. And of course, they're not reported to a federal court. The second creation point is where there's a filing of charges with the court. This is where the court docket index begins. And as you see, misdemeanor citations make it picked up there as well. And let's go to the second page of this chart. We can. And this second page is an overflow continuing with the criminal case. As you look down through this, you can see where at the sentencing, where a record can be created. Above that, at the disposition, if you notice the line, the dotted line, it may go to the state and the FBI. At this point, a dismissal is not always automatically reported to the state. Courts sometimes neglect to forward this information. We'll look at that a little more in depth later, but look at number 4, the incarceration and jail-prison connection. The jail and prison boxes reflect secondary criminal records, or what we refer to as criminal-related records. State prison records are pretty available on the web. Some sheriff departments offer some, and these records are often the ones that you can find easily on Google. But to summarize, there's a variety of creation points, and there's a number of different records being created. The question you need to ask, which ones are you getting? Let's go on to the next slide there. We're talking about courthouses here. This is, okay. There are actually about 13,000 courthouses in the U.S., and that's including courts that have civil records, probate, juvenile, just the little town and justice systems. But the key thing on this is, look at the bottom line in red. Of the 4,800 courts, there's 2990 to provide online access. That's all. It's not all online. So let's go on to the next slide if we can. Performing a name search of the docket, you'll often find the location of a record, but it won't uncover the record yourself. But this is important because of the identifiers. Let's say that the applicant has a common name, John Smith. He lives in a populous city, but the index doesn't include the date of birth. It just has the year of birth. This means that somebody at the courthouse is going to have to look at each case file and search further to find the full date of birth. Otherwise, you'll have what's called as a false positive. And there's a significant difference between searching an index determine if a record exists versus viewing the image or making copies of documents. And this is what a screening company goes through when they hire an outside record retriever to go into the courthouse and view records. So it's imperative that you are represented by somebody who is using the identifiers and looking at the record itself to determine if the applicant is the identity of the search. Let's go on to the next record slide here. Okay, this slide talks about the State Office of Court Administration, and these record access modes are extremely valuable and extremely well used, but there's some caveats. You can see 32 states offer some sort of system, but they're not all statewide and they're not all compliant. You can read the disclaimer in Minnesota, but if somebody's giving you Minnesota criminal records instantly, you got a problem. What's too lengthy to show on this slide is the fact that what's not on the online system but is at the public access terminal or at the courthouse: harassment, domestic abuse cases, comment fields for all the case types, party street address, warrants, probation before conviction, diversion programs. There are certain searches in Hennepin and Ramsey County that don't show up unless the results appear in a payment or a court appearance. In other words, the online system that is used is not full, and there's other states like that as well. Let's go on to the next slide here. If we can. Is there another slide?
Are we there, Mike? The record access, inequity, local courthouses, state office, state criminal record.
We want to go to the one that talks about the state criminal records. I don't see that on my screen.
Okay, let me.
Would be slide 13 at the bottom.
This is what you asked for, slide 13. You want me to skip this?
Whatever. I'm still on slide 12. Unless you want to tell me you're on slide 13, I can.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I just figured out I had it paused. I am so sorry, everybody. Sorry, especially Mike. I'll get you back here. Okay. Is this where we want to be?
Okay. Right. Okay. This is it. All right. Now, there's a major point to be made here. When the courthouse has a record, and remember that chart that we looked at, the flow of the record, when it goes to the state criminal record agency. Once a record passes the courthouse doors and moves to the state agency, the record is no longer public. And you know, for example, 5 states don't even provide access. California is one. They're the biggest state, population-wise. What I want to stress to you is the importance of the bottom line about the reliability of the records. Because, let's go on to the next slide here. Let's go on beyond that slide. Let's go one more. Look at these statistics. This is scary. Reasons that state criminal record repositories are open to concern about completeness, consistency, and accuracy. This survey that was done by the Department of Justice, it is a couple years old. It takes them a couple years to put these things together. They've done 3 of them. I've tracked them, and they don't change much. There is an abundance of dispositions that are floating. Nobody knows who they're attached to. There are a lot of states that don't even send the dispositions to the courthouse, that don't send them to the states. There's a huge backlog. One state's got 85 days. And some states don't even require the felony courts to report final dispositions. What's also scary is this is what the FBI is using. Let's go on to the next slide, if we can. And as I say, please don't misunderstand the message. A lot of these statewides are good, but a best practice is to perform a criminal record search using the state and the county, and also from a database vendor should be considered. And the last line about hiring decisions goes back to restrictions in states, which we're moving on to. Let's go on to the next point there. And okay, we're talking about the criminal-related records. Remember the criminal case flow chart? When the case has a final disposition, it's often when these records are created. And most of these records are open, many are online, and many of these exist in vendor databases. If you're wondering what the federal watch lists are, those are, for example, the Bureau of Industry and Security, part of the U.S. Department of Government, provides 3 lists dealing with import and export companies. The denied persons list, the unverified list, and the entity list. The bottom line is these lists are great. They're usually free, and these lists are heavily used in the vendor databases, which is great, but that's what a lot of the records are. When they say multi-state, they certainly could have the sexual registry from every state, but they don't have the court records in that state. They're not going to tell you that on Google. Let's go to the next page. And then the online vendors. In the interest of moving along, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but there's 2 primary ways that vendors will provide their data. They'll purchase available databases and aggregate all these records into their own proprietary database. And then the other vendor, which is data extraction or screen scraping, is quite different. This vendor will receive a record request and simultaneously search as many as 2,000 online sources at once. And that's how you get instant national record. But of course, if 40% of the courts aren't online, you're obviously not going to get a true national search. Let's go on to the next screen then.
Hey, Mike, quick question.
Yes.
Your take on screen scraping.
Well, I've got a slide later on this.
Okay, all right, then we'll save that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're going to kind of march through some of this a little quicker. We talked a little bit about the lack of identifiers. But
take your time, Mike, unless you've got to be someplace. No. We've got actually more people hopping on the line, so all right. We're going to keep going.
So what do you do when you don't have an identifier? We'll see this on the next slide. Well, let me. I'm sorry, folks. The slides are changed on me a little bit. I'm shuffling here. The lack of identifiers and the false positives affect record searching at all of the access points. But the source or the courthouse is the surest bet to show an identifier. here's a sample of redaction. Government redaction of identifiers is, as it says, creating havoc. One of the latest states to make this an issue is Wyoming. The Wyoming Supreme Court has instituted a new rule that went into effect January the 1st. As of this date, all court documents filed and viewable by the public must have the day and the month of the birth date redacted. That's effective now. And in those cases where the SSN still appears there, they will allow the last 4 digits of the SSN. And let's go on to the next slide here.
Okay, I'm trying to make sure I'm giving you your right slides there. So
no, that's fine.
I hope everybody caught that and digested all that.
Let's go to the next one. Okay. Okay. The Wyoming court actually based their new law on the federal court system, which has the reputation of being the hardest court system in the nation to verify the identity of criminals. 6 or 7% of all criminal records created in the U.S. are records of federal crime. Yet these records are often overlooked because of the extensive costs and time of the manual labor needed to confirm the identity of the record. You have to call and look at the file. You have to call the attorney or the prosecutor. You may even go to the to confirm the identity of an applicant. You may have to spend an awful lot of time and energy just to track down the aspects of the case, because the feds have decided to protect the innocent, which is great, but they're going to remove the date of birth and the Social Security numbers from all the case files for everybody involved, including the criminals.
So, Mike, on a federal crime, we're talking somebody interstate kidnapping, a drug charge, the DEA
mean
involved.
And nasty stuff. Mean and nasty stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right. Let's go on to the next slide then. Okay. This talks about the restrictions inequity. Are records open or closed? We've already mentioned that at least 50% of the state criminal records agency are restricted or closed. Of course, the FBI are closed to employers or to the public unless there's a statutory right. For example, occupations that are licensed, such as like stockbrokers or jockeys, they require fingerprint search. But the reality is that the restrictions are very different from one.
Now, why a jockey?
Yes.
And everybody's probably thinking, well, a jockey, and this happens, and I'm sure it's happening right as we speak, if it's the Daily Double someplace. If you go to the history of like the Boston Mafia, they were shaking down jockeys, fixing races, so you would obviously want to make sure that the little person riding that horse doesn't have a past that subjects him. And if you're betting on the race, I'm sure you wouldn't like that jockey pulling back on the reins on the backstretch or what have you. So just to give you a little background on why a jockey might be subject to a fingerprint betting. Sorry, Mike.
Oh, that's all right. We track 8,000 occupational positions that have some sort of a licensing board that may require a background check, and these boards have the capacity to go to the FBI. Well, let's move on to the next one here. Okay. This slide mentions the FCRA, which is, as I'm sure you're all aware, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which you should all be aware of, or at least you should be. But the fact that an employer and a pre-employment screening firm, or as they're also called, a CRA, standing for Consumer Reporting Agency, must be very, very cognizant of the state FCR-type restrictions that are in effect. Looking at this list, you can see there's a lot of concern in certain states, and it goes beyond just one state. For example, what happens if you have a California-based company that's hiring a person living in Georgia to work at a facility in Louisiana? Which state rules apply? It can get pretty messy. You know, the best thing to do to answer that question actually is to go with the state that's the most restrictive. But a discussion of all the detail on this slide can take hours, and it's probably best left to another session, but it's very important to mention and to acknowledge, because there are restrictions on reporting, what can be reported by a pre-employment screen company to an employer, and what the employer can use. And when you use a Google instant background check, I don't think that these state restrictions are going to be mentioned or be qualified before you receive your content. That's one dangerous aspect about that. Let's move on to the next slide.
Yeah, now I know Mike has no idea I'm going to even mention this, and I'm sure he's blushing if I could see him on the other end, but all I want to let you know is CRA Help Desk is an excellent resource. It's something that I subscribe to. You may want to check it out. It's not just for background screening companies. It is for companies themselves. You can check out what's going on in your state, what you can and can't do, what's available. It's an excellent resource. In my eyes, it's underpriced, but I did want to plug that. Sorry, Mike, when I saw that, I had to say that. So
okay. Well, this content, you know, the answers to what these states are obviously would appear at that webpage. But we're going to move into the technology inequity now. When you're on criminal records, and you know, from government resources, we'll look at vendor resources next. But the state repository issues that we discussed brings up issues of what's up to date, what's really appearing on the records, and the fact that 30% of the county courts, and let me qualify that should say county criminal courts holding felony records are not online. So the level of technology that a court or a state agency has will certainly affect the content of the record. And it's the flow of the disposition data, and which has to be concerned. Is the record truly being updated, or is there a backlog of paper copies? I mentioned here the green screen system in North Carolina, and quickly, North Carolina is sort of taking a step back. They're putting a new program into place effective March 1st. There has been for years a means for North Carolina records to be pulled on a fairly instant basis through the state. It licensed certain vendors to receive a daily criminal extract file, and these licensees receive a feed from the state courts, which includes all the information on the criminal court case. But starting March 1st, they've decided to remove the court details from these data feeds, and they're going to replace it with just a demographic extract showing the name and the date of birth, which is fine. That tells you who is the person, but now they're going to force everybody to use the green screen system, which is basically something from the early and mid-1990s, which is, it's not DOS, but it looks like a DOS-based system, and you have a charge every time that you access a screen, including your login screen, and every time you move up and down the screen, there's a charge, and it's going to turn everything into a very, very time-consuming situation. And so it's not a good thing. And so if you're going to get instant North Carolina records after March 1st, you're not getting records that have any court case files on them since March 1st, because it's going to take a lot of time and effort to plug those in. So there's no more truly instant North Carolina records after March 1st if the law stays in effect. There's some screening companies trying to fight that right now. So let's move on to the next slide there, Kevin.
Okay.
So we're going to talk more about the technology with the private vendors. These two vendors, proprietary database vendors, and there's a typo on number 2. It says date extract. Apologize, that should be data extract. But the proprietary databases companies are often referred to as multi-state databases. Some vendors like to call themselves national databases, but there's no true national database in existence except for the FBI. So using the word national is a bit deceiving. And the second bullet here means that these databases are often filled with the sexual registry records, incarceration records, in other words, the criminal-related records, since they're most easily purchased. And as I mentioned before, there are some databases whose records for a state are only from these open sites, since the courts refuse to sell their data.
Hey, Mike.
I'm
sorry, Mike. Go ahead. I had a quick question on the FBI check, because I'm asked this question thousands of times. I mean, most private sector employers, in fact, virtually everybody on this call, cannot access the database unless there's a voluntary law that grants you the right, such as a daycare provider or home health care, banks. What is actually in the FBI database? Some people say it's just felony information or arrest information. That, but I want to ask you. I value
what's in there is what they receive from the states.
Okay.
What filters to them, the flow of the court case, as we looked on those initial screens. They always don't get the dispositions. They always don't get the results of the case. The strength of the FBI is because of the use of fingerprints.
Sure.
And there will be some misdemeanors on there. What could be a misdemeanor in one state may be a felony in another, so that's kind of a wide question. But they're fed the data from the state record repositories, but they will get fed from, I believe they will get fed from large municipal areas too, and at bookings and arrests. So they're going to have a very extensive, robust database of people and fingerprints. They won't necessarily show criminal records. They may show charges, but not the criminal record.
Sure.
Because there's no record if the person ends up not being charged.
Gotcha.
Okay. Go to the next slide here. The pros and cons of using the vendor multi-state databases. You know, there's some obvious advantages. You have an applicant who lives in a small town bordering a large town, and maybe he has an undisclosed criminal conviction there, and you'd only find that out if you searched. You wouldn't find that out if you only searched the county where the person resided, so you may miss it. So that does give you a wider spectrum. There is a lot of advantages there. And another, this last bullet is fairly significant. In a protection mode, protecting your company, if you knew that a multi-state database existed and you failed to use it, and if that database contained an example like we mentioned above, and there could be legal ramifications if this person was hired and harmed the public while employed by you. So, I mean, there's a legal point there that an attorney is going to take and use to full advantage against you, if possible. So let's move on to the next slide.
And Mike, some people might not clearly understand what a multi-state database is.
The multi-state are the vendors who buy the they buy databases. They aggregate data from multiple resources, the jails, sexual registries, and from the courts who will sell them data. Not every court will sell it. Some courts aren't even computerized, but they buy what they can and put those together. I mean, put the records together, and a multi-state database is the better way of saying what a national database is, because there's truly no national database. So it
could be the southeast states. You could get 5 states. There are some that go East Coast. I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other.
Right.
What it is it's just what it sounds like it is. Multiple states. It's not the entire state. And even a multi-state, there should be a qualifier that the information that is available. They might not get, even if, so Florida, for instance, you can buy criminal data from certain county courthouses. There's 67 of them, but you can't get all of them. So if you did a private Florida database search, it differs drastically compared to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement one.
Here's a very simple example. Let's say that you, for some reason, you went and you purchased the addresses of all the Goodyear tire stores, all the Firestone stores, and all the Goodrich stores in the U.S. You put them all together and said, I have a national database of tire stores. But Big O didn't want to sell to you. Discount Tire didn't want to sell to you. You know, that's really
that's a good analogy.
Simple analogy, because the courts are not going to sell to everybody. They don't. You know, as we mentioned before, there's 32 states that have a state office of court administration. 30 of the 32 are online. One state, South Dakota, is a pretty cool system. They take the court clerk who's the least busy for that year or that quarter, and he does all the requests himself. They send everything to him. In Mississippi, it's done by fax. The other 30 states, some are great sites, some are really good. You actually can see the same information on the public access terminal if you walk into the courthouse that you would online. In some states, it's not that way. New Jersey, Minnesota. We talked about Minnesota, so you have to be careful. But the bottom line to all this is, where is all this flowing to? Well, it's flowing to these national databases, and there's a lot of advantages about them. But you know, we'll look at the next slide or two. But there's good and bad, and you've got to be aware of the pluses and minuses, and you've got to be able to deal with the pluses and minuses within your work environment. Know what is good and what's not good to use. Let's go on to the next slide there.
Okay.
The disadvantages. Okay, these are the things to be aware of. Is the record complete? Is it all there? Was there a true match using the full name and the date of birth, or a partial match with just the year of birth and no middle initial? I can't emphasize enough that multi-state databases or vendor databases, as useful as they are, may very well lack identifiers. What's that mean? You have to then send somebody to the courthouse to verify the identity of that applicant. Did that applicant not disclose a criminal record? Is that John Smith, born in 1981, the same John Smith who has this bad criminal record history? You don't know unless you go and verify by the rest of the birth date. Timeliness issue, that's a valid issue. If the database vendor updates his system monthly, great, but what if the data is 6 months old by the time he does it, by the time he gets it? Has this been disclosed? And what if the database is updated annually? You get one annual dump from that database. Well, then down the road you go. Legal compliance issues. You know, all of the above, if you cut corners, will get you into trouble. One of the aspects of FCRA, interestingly, is that FCRA doesn't say you have to use the most accurate database. They say you have to use the most up-to-date database. And
to interject, this is a frequently asked question when I tell, especially a new client, that we need the date of birth of the individual that they're looking to do an employment background check on. With a common name, now a common name could be Smith, Jones, Rogers, Gonzalez, Martinez, just think of any common name. And because most of the background checks that are being done are non-fingerprint, meaning you're not getting a fingerprint scanned or rolled on somebody. You're going by the information that you have, the name of the individual. Sometimes people will slightly change their name to get by a background check. The date of birth is a big one, and it may be they just transposed a number. So say they were born May 15th, 1972. They may put down May 15th, 1975, knowing that there's a non-match on one of the identifiers, and the date of birth is a key identifier. Social Security number is important. The problem with Social Security numbers for the past 10 years, due to identity theft, there are many, many restrictions. But if you do have a Social Security number, we can confirm it, and that, again, is an important identifier. But DOB and Social Security numbers, those have always been the two main identifiers that, to somebody who's trying to throw off a background check, that's something that they're going to change or modify. So just thought that would be important, since we're talking about accuracy and identifying the right person versus having an inaccurate check on somebody. Mike?
Right, the criminal record can, you can buy several versions of that criminal record depending on what resource that you go to get it. It may or may not have all the identifiers. Let's go on to the next screen here. Sort of a cut to the chase on multi-vendor databases. This is a saying that I've coined, and I use this when I've asked my opinion on vendor databases. Shame on you if you don't use them, but shame on you if that's all you use. They're very useful. They're very useful supplemental tools, but that's what they are. They're supplemental. They're not the main. They're not the main search. Before we move on, there's one thing I wanted to just not backtrack, but regarding data extraction, which is a vendor-type database, and we mentioned what goes on there is that they. Well, let me see the next slide. Whether Kevin, it may be on the next slide.
Okay.
Okay. No. Well, let me. While you're looking at that, just to say a little more on data extraction. It is a very growing, useful technology, and it's getting better and better all the time. If you use a data extractor, you've got to try to determine how good is this vendor, because the stakes are real high. Consider the consequences of missing data while doing a background check. there is a reality in that the state and county jurisdictions are not necessarily pleased that data extractors are used to search their records. They fear the bandwidth may be overloaded, and there's a legitimate fear that some companies are going into data extract and simply systematically extracting records and using that records to populate a commercial database or a multi-vendor database. And so to thwart web data extractions, a lot of government agencies have begun to put the challenge response test on. You've probably seen these screens. It's been purposely distorted image that contains letters or numbers or words, and to gain access you have to type it in exactly. That's what they're doing in some states. And it is likely that the use of web data extraction systems or screen scraping will continue, but and it is going to get better. But it does have a lot of the same advantages and disadvantages that we've looked at and talked about here in the last several slides with the multi-state databases. So now, false advertising, web-based background checks. Hey, it'd be great if you go and get an instant national background check for $15 or whatever, but you know, it's just not going to happen. The reality is, as it says, the technology is has bypassed the record keeping. In other words, technology has gone beyond what the government is doing with their records, and the government's records are not all online. So, you know, it's like the example I used about the tire stores. You're not going to find them all. And what happens is that these sites will prey upon, you know, they're out to make a buck. They're looking for the record user who has more emphasis on how easy is it to get the record, and on their priority scale, the content of the record, and if it's an uninformed employer, the safety of using this site is paramount to having legal issues. You've got to be careful. You've got to be careful. You know, after all the stuff we've talked about in the last half hour or so, you know, how do you think, what is the value of these websites and what they claim? I mean, it can't be very true. Let's go on to the next page here. To the next slide if we can.
Okay. How's this, Mike? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm still seeing slide 29.
I'm sorry, Mike. I'll get you there. Okay. Slide 30, you able to see it okay?
Not yet.
Let's see what's going on here.
Okay, here we go. These are the warnings, the things that, the criteria that you should be looking at when you look at a website, and you can use this. This is somewhat common sense, but you can use this at about any place. I mean, if you're purchasing something, a product that you're buying, but these are the 4 items that are often used by these phony national database companies. It's just marketing, charging membership fees for unlimited access to national background data. Well, unlimited access, what they're doing is they're scraping all the free sites. You know, there's plenty of free sites out there, and this type of information isn't just criminal record. I mean, you know, you've got real estate related, you've got stuff from the recorder's office, you've got stuff from state agencies, you've got certain vital record information, civil, probate, things like that. But a large number of government entities put this up on the web for free searching, and it's meant as a benefit to their constituents. And what these companies have done is that they're selling convenience, basically. What they're doing is they're saying, well, you give us so much money and we'll let you see them all. They're saving you from having to go and find them, which is fine, which is great, but that's what they should be saying what it's about, because they haven't bought any of this. They're just using what's out there and making it simpler for the user. There's one, I don't want to say the wrong word. I don't want to mention something and get sued here, but a, quote, web type detective site, one of these websites who've been selling stuff for years and putting all these there's testimonials up from these people about how great their site is and saying they're members of this association. Well, they made up the trade association. There's no such association. You know, it's out there. Promoting the non-FCRA compliant, and we should add non-state restriction compliant employment screening. If they don't tell you, you don't know what you're getting. And obviously not explaining the limitations to a database. Yeah, we have a national database, but the only content we have in this state is the sexual offender registry. They're not going to tell you that. And so if you see any of these marking schemes, you know, you should be warned. Stay away. If you're an employer, you're doing this for hiring purposes, stay away. Let's go on to the next slide there.
So just to reiterate, and you're very clear on that, Mike, there are, I call them bait and switch sites. If you go to a site, and there's some well-known sites out there, what they're doing is they're collecting your information, number one, and they resell that information for marketing purposes. Number two, a switch and bait, and a bait and switch. And you know what I mean by bait and switch. It's
sure.
The automobile industry practices it. Sorry, automobile. I've got a lot of friends in that.
Areas.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. There's a lot of honorable auto dealerships and salesmen with integrity, but a bait and switch is they give you a car that they only have one of them, and they price it at such a ridiculously low price that it gets you over to the dealership. When you get there, this is how the bait and switch works is, we're out of that, we sold it, can I show you, know, since you're down here, let me show you this other one. Well, that's exactly what a bait and switch website will do. They'll draw you in, usually with the word free or some ridiculously low price, and then they're going to upsell you to a $50, $100, $200 package, and it's, in my eyes, I got 3 rules. It's got to be legal, it's got to be, it's got to meet the ethics test, and it's got to be synced with my moral compass. So legal, if it's legal, ethical, and moral, it meets the acid test. So that's what works for me. If you have a guide like that, use it. If not, feel free to use mine. Sorry, Mike.
That's all right.
You're up.
Yeah, there's only certain people. Some people do it the right way. Some people don't do it the right way, and I think you got to stay away from the people who cut corners. And I know this isn't an infomercial, but I know Kevin well enough and been around Kevin long enough to know that he does things the right way. And a few final thoughts. These are the things to think about if you want to do it the right way. 5 bullets here. I don't need to read them to you, but you know, for proper due diligence, for performing a criminal record search, I think the bottom line is that you want to use a county search, you want to use a state search that's there, and you want to use a search from a national database vendor. You should consider all three if you really want to cover your due diligence on a search. So,
Mike, I think these are so important. I mean, I'd like to read them just in case somebody forgot their eyeglasses today and can't get this, although it's clear as a bell to me. Number one, rely on your pre-employment screening firm to guide you through the Fair Credit Reporting Act and state law requirements. You might even have some local things that you have to pay attention to, especially if you're in the Berkeley, California area. Your pre-employment screening firm knows the best database resources to use, state or multi-state.
Let me say something here. I mean, Kevin will know. I mean, he knows which state databases are schlocky.
Yeah.
You know, he knows when to use it. You don't use the one in Texas. Stay away from the one in Texas. Is purely supplemental. It's full of holes. I mean, there's certain things people in the industry know, and there's a big difference between guiding an account, a customer, to what's best for him versus what's best for the vendor to make a buck. Anyway, go ahead.
So go to, and I know we've got some of our clients on the line, but there's people I don't recognize. So if whatever your background screening company is, they should know the answers to these questions. So ask them, have them do the legwork. That's what you're paying them. That's why you're partnering with them. And in fact, I mean, we view all of our clients as partners. We want you to be successful. We don't want you to be getting into any hot water because you missed something or didn't follow a certain guideline of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So, you know, we want to make sure that you're successful. And if you have somebody that you're using and they're unsure of these things and don't come across as knowledgeable, then that may be a red flag, or it may be that person just had a bad day and couldn't think and chew gum at the same time. But number three is make sure you have and supply identifiers, including the full date of birth. And I mean, I fought personally in Florida. They were trying to make it the person's year of birth as an identifier, and that would have caused, especially Florida being one of the top, population-wise, in the top three as far as largest populations of states in the United States. If you didn't have the exact date of birth and you were going on a year of birth, you know how many possible records would be achieved? I mean, it would be a nightmare. It would slow down the hiring process so slowly because you're going just on a year of birth. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about with a common name like Smith, Jones, Gonzalez, Martinez. You need to have that, and especially with the Social Security number, pretty much not being able to access that due to redaction and to protect the further onslaught of identity theft. That's something that has gone away as a tool, not completely, but it's let's just say it's more of a challenge than it was during the mid-90s. And then the fourth point that Mike has is, you know, the most effective and compliant criminal record search is to search each county with the subject, where the subject has lived or has worked in prior years, and usually the guideline is seven years. Supplement this court search with a statewide or multi-state search. Hey, folks, I know everybody's that's doing criminal record checks, that you have a budget. You do what you can do. I'm not saying you got to break the bank to do a background check. Some of you might not be able to do a multi-state search with a statewide, but usually your background screening company will be able to help you out and give you as best a search for the dollars that you've invested. And then finally, Mike has, be consistent in the level of accuracy you depend upon when accessing criminal records. And I think in a nutshell, Mike, that really drives home, best practices. One thing I did, and I was going to do this through a poll question, but I'll just ask it now because we were talking about Google. A lot of people think, many of you I'm sure have Google set as your home page, and hey, I love Google in terms of some of what they're good at in terms of search, but if you're solely using Google thinking that that is your sole source of searching or doing a background, let me just explain it this way. The poll question was going to be, how much of the web do you believe that Google crawls and searches? And I'm talking the entire internet web. And the questions it was going to start out at 82% and 66%. Anyway, I'm just going to cut to the chase and give you the answer. And it's going to blow you away. It's 1%. That's 1% of the web is what Google searches. Now, when they say that to people, I get a number of reactions. One is usually shock. It's usually like, no way, Google is like they own the lion's share of search. Well, there's the shallow public web that most of us have access to, but there's also a deep web. And I usually use the analogy of the ocean, or if you're not near the ocean, if you're near a lake or a pond, that Google will search good. So if you're crossing, if you're swimming, boating, whatever, the first few feet down is what Google searches. Now, at times, they can dive deep, but for the most part, they're in shallow water. So if you're using them solely as the search engine for everything and anything, you're missing out on a lot. I'm not going to get into all of the other ways that you can search besides Google, but I'll give you a couple of tools. One is look for multiple search engine sites that are out there that combine Google along with other searching sites. So Yahoo, Google, there's such sites as dogpile.com, and it's an aggregator of sorts. It's like using 4 or 5 search engines at the same time. Plus, there are search engines that search specifically for certain things on the web. So, and I usually talk about this in a social media webinar that I do that talks about searching down to find out, say, your current employee that you're paying to do tweets. There's a tool that you can use to follow all of the tweets that person has used. There's also some things on Facebook. If you're interested, I'm kind of going off of a topic right now, but one of the reasons I'm doing that is to give you a lead up to our next webinar, which will be on March 15th, and it will be on social media and the good, the bad, and the ugly of it, and what tools at this time are working, and we're also going to get into the stage of when you would use that. There's many studies that are saying that people are using it pre-employment. I'll give you some information that may change your protocol on how you use it. I'm not saying that there isn't a wealth of information out there. It's just when you use it, where you use it, and as we were talking throughout this webinar, accuracy is the most important thing, because you want to do on any type of search. So we've been talking a lot about criminal record checks. We want to make sure that this, with as much certainty as we can, is the subject that we're searching, the individual we're searching, is the person that you are looking to bring aboard as a new employee, and obviously you're looking to hire an asset and not a liability. And in a nutshell, that's what we provide. So, Mike, any last thoughts on either what we've reviewed today? I do want to say this again. The attendees, the count actually had gone up as we got more and more into this. So I thank you for the people that were patient while we had a little technical difficulty at the beginning. But I respect you all in that you're investing in yourself and becoming knowledgeable about one important area of the hiring process. And again, I promised I was going to send each and every one of you a gift. So whoever came on in the beginning and whoever is on right now is going to get a special gift. Stephanie will be contacting you because this will be a physical gift that's actually mailed out to you. And I do want to thank Mike, and Mike is a believer just as I am, and is delivering good, accurate content and not blowing a bunch of smoke out there. And I knew Mike would do extremely well. I mean, you met and exceeded my expectations, Mike, so I thank you. I do want to let you know that if you want more information about Mike, his website is brbpub.com. That's
No,
B like beta, R Romeo, B beta, pub. I'm sorry, Mike?
Publications. It's BRB Publications.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you for the clarification. BRB Publications. Either type that into your URL or just look up Mike Sankey, S-A-N-K-E-Y, BRB. You're talking to an industry pioneer, an industry veteran who has been around this industry. He's one of the, I can't say enough good things about Mike. He's just somebody that I respect, both from his knowledge and sharing his knowledge and really caring about the industry, caring about everything that he does from his publications that over the years, and we're talking 1994, he is the publication guru to public records, motor vehicle records, motor vehicle record codes. I mean, you name it, he has an arsenal of excellent information. And that website, that CRA Help Desk, is excellent for both a background screening company and a company that wants to know, and whether you have an in-house attorney or an outside attorney, it's in simple layman's language. This is what you can do nationally. This is what you can do state by state. And again, I think it's like it's too cheap in my estimation. I think it should be priced 10 times what it is. But I mean, an investment of, I think it's like $125. Again, to me, I think the thing is a steal at that price. But you'll, and again, CRA Help Desk, Mike Sankey, you'll find that other good resource. So again, we're doing our job trying to pass it forward, pay it forward, and we sincerely hope that this information is helpful to you. If you have any additional questions, you can contact me personally. The best way to do that is sending an email off to Stephanie at AccuScreen.com, Stephanie with an IE at the end at AccuScreen.com. You've got our 800 number, whatever works for you. I know depending on your age, you might want to text me, but we're not taking any texts today. Maybe you can talk Stephanie into taking a text. But phone, email, website, it's all good. For those prospects that are on the call that weren't that aren't a current client and want more information, just go to our homepage. There's a couple of places. One is a button that you click for more information, or if you want to become a client, just follow the green light, and we'll start that process. Mike, you want to give out any phone number or email, anything where
sure.
people?
I thank you for the compliments, and I appreciate the fact that you asked me to do this. Sorry that we got off to such a rough start on this.
No. That's all my bad. I'm going to make it up.
If somebody has a question they'd like to pose, I do answer the phone and I do answer emails. My phone number is 800-929-3811, and the email address is Mike at, and the webpage, brbpublications.com. And
okay.
Appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Sure thing. Thank you. And this is the end of the webinar. I want to again thank my guest, Mike Sankey of BRB Publications, and I wish each and every one of you all the best. And if there's anything that you would like to see in future webinars, from topics to you name it, we are always looking for feedback. Although I've been in the industry quite a long period of time, I'm always learning. So if there is anything that I can do to impart, transfer my knowledge to you, all you got to do is ask, and there's a variety of communication points to do that. So thank you. This is the official end of today's webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.